My name is Larry Moskowitz, and I'm one of the volunteer coordinators for a group called the Left Labor Project, which is a group of about over 100 active labor folks here in the city. And we joke around and say we've agreed to three things: that we are an explicitly socialist organization, that we believe that the working class and its allies in the community of color in the first place are the main motive force for social change, and our meetings that start at 6 and by 8. They're all fundamental principled positions. We're relatively new, getting off the ground, and we have been assisted by IRPE, Union of Radical Political Economists, in a number of our discussions and presentations, and so we are thankful for the invitation to be here. We'll keep this pretty informal, and we'll go around and have everyone introduce themselves, including the audience, so we know who you all are. We have three different unions here. We have Workers United, we have Local 78 of the Laborers Union, and we have Local 338 of the RWDSU. And each one will spend about 10 minutes talking about their industry and what's happening to their members as a result of the economic crisis. And then we hope that you all will chip in, and we will keep it relatively informal. So why don't we first start by going around and introducing ourselves. We'll start with the panelists and then with the folks in the audience.
My name is Norma Milligan, affiliated with from Workers United, affiliated with SEIU, from the Laundry Joint Board, New York.
Megan Chambers, also with the Laundry Workers Joint Board of Workers United, SEIU.
Great. My name is Eli Kent. I'm with Laborers Local 78, Asbestos Lead Hazardous Wastes Laborers. All right, there we go. My name is Eli Kent. I'm. Can you all hear me right now? Great.
Don't use that mic.
Wonderful. I can talk as loud as y'all want me to. So, my name is Eli Kent. I'm with Laborers Local 78. We're asbestos, lead, hazardous waste laborers. Thank you.
My name is Kevin Lynch. I'm Director of Organizing and Legislative Affairs for the Local 338 of the RWDSU, which is part of the United Food and Commercial Workers.
My name is Esteban Mendilasa. I'm a research assistant / organizer for Local 338 RWDSU New York City.
My name is Rena Garst. I'm a member of IRPE. I'm a retired member of the Local 1180 Communications Workers and a whole bunch of unions for that.
I'm Alex Doppelmayr, and I'm a member of the United Federation of Teachers. And what we're experiencing under this current city administration is kind of like a bringing the occupation down. I think the long-term idea is to have this the tenure removed and have a lot of short time, kind of just a couple of years workers, sort of kind of cheaper workers.
Here, man.
I'm Alex Raffin. I'm actually my second go-around as a member of the United Auto Workers, actually, but as a teacher, because I'm a graduate teaching assistant at West Coast of the University of California, where we are in UAW for quite some time. And it's slowly but surely decimating the entire public education system in the state of California, which is thousands and thousands and thousands of jobs, and also not a bad, or at least used to be, not a bad place to learn something.
Alex, what do you studying?
I'm in the Department of City Regional Planning, so I also do some labor-related work as a researcher as well.
My name is Terry Maroney. I have a public access TV show on Long Island. I used to be a professor. I'm retired from physics. When I was in the union. My name is Julio Guato. I am a member of the Union for Radical Political Economics, and I am also an associate professor of economics here at St. Francis College. This is the small college of the big dreams, and I think that the dreams of radicals are pretty big. So this is an appropriate venue for radical thinking.
My name is Rini Tobat. I've been hanging around Irving for a lot of years, and I spent 10 years very active in NTU, which is the National Treasury Employees Union, which is not affiliated with the AFL at all. And I just changed jobs, and I'm still waiting for the union rep to contact me.
Where are you working now?
The Equal Employment Opportunity Commission.
So we're going to start with Local 78, and then we'll take it from there. Thank you all for coming.
Great. Yeah, thank you everyone for coming. Thank you, Larry, for inviting us here. I mean, our industry we're part of the construction industry. Our bread and butter, the bulk of what we do is asbestos abatement. So when construction goes down, as you all know, construction is one of the most cyclical industries there is, usually the first and the hardest hit by recessions. So we have seen this period, and just by the numbers, I mean, this period in 2009, from the beginning of January 1st through the middle of September, we've seen a 70% drop off. I'm sorry, it's only 70%, so 30% drop off in the number of jobs filed, but as far as the amount of work done, we've seen about a 50% drop off. Okay, and in our industry, our members don't have steady work. The work is they work for as long as the job continues, and then once the job ends, they usually often get laid off and have to go look for another work. They work for many different companies. It's not just, some of our members do have steady work for one company, get brought from job to job, but a majority of them do not. And so as work dries up, they are put out of work. And right now, currently, a lot of our members are out of work, more than we've seen in past years. A lot of our members are, we are the middle class. Our members are the middle class, the working class in this city. So, as the American dream goes, and most of them, the large majority are immigrants, probably 95%. So as the American dream goes, they come to this country, get a good job, they get into, through the union. They have a union job, start making enough money where they can buy a house. You all know what houses have cost, and over the past 7 years here in New York, we saw a huge increase in housing costs and the price of in the housing market, and that's dropped off as well. So it's kind of been a double whammy for our members. Again, a lot of our members do own homes, and they've seen the value of those homes depreciate greatly, whereas they're still paying those same mortgages, and they've seen their work dry up. So that's kind of it's a basic overview of what's happening in our membership. What we're doing about it is the same thing that we always do, which is we organize. Local 78 puts a tremendous amount of resources into organizing. We've actually seen our market share, the percentage of work that is union, increase this past year.
Versus non-union?
Right. It's normally hovers, slightly, increased slightly, but, it normally hovers around 85 to 90% of all work in New York City and Long Island, which is our territory. We also were just given New Jersey as well, but that's a work in progress. We normally see about 85 to 90% of all work in the asbestos field is union. This past year, it's been just slightly upwards of 90%. Now, whether that's due to the recession or not, we're not certain. For sure, the recession hits the non-union and the union companies equally. So that's and so what we're doing is we're putting more resources into organizing than we ever have before. So we can fight more for those jobs that are out there. And that's basically what I have to say.
Good. Short presentations, and we'll take questions after the entire panel is done with. So, Workers United, you're up.
Okay.
So, I'm Megan Chambers, and I'm with the Laundry Workers Joint Board of Workers United. The Laundry Workers Joint Board has 5,000 members in New York and New Jersey and Connecticut who work in factories and industrial laundries that launder sheets for hotels and for hospitals and linens for restaurants, fundamentally, and also uniforms for industry as well. And our members are we represent actually drivers as well as production workers in the industry and mechanics, but the production workers are the majority. Most of the members are women. It's a low-wage industry. Most of the members are African American and immigrants, mostly Latina, and in New York City, Haitian immigrants. But we have a very diverse membership. And in the last 10 years, I would say, and Norma has been around longer than me, but certainly in the last 10 years, we've fought really hard to bring standards up in our industry, and we've made really important gains in health insurance, in pensions, and in wages for our members who really are not well paid. And
Average wage in the industry?
I mean, the average wage for production workers in the industry is probably something like $10 an hour. Yeah. The average wage, if you include, drivers and mechanics, is maybe 16 or something like that. It's really, it has, but we've gotten to the point where we have, very solid health benefits for our membership. We have decent pensions for our membership. We have health insurance that's family coverage where people don't copay on their premiums. And these are things that are just vital to keeping our members' lives together. And so the recession has actually hit the industry, some parts much harder than others. Linen supply, which is the restaurants and also the hotels. We know, I think, the hospitals are still operating, right? And so if you're laundering hospital linens, we have not seen layoffs in that area. But the restaurant industry, the hotels have obviously been really hard hit in New York and around, in any major city. And our members have experienced layoffs. We've had to have agree to temporary reductions in hours, where people are taking big hits on their paychecks in some plants. And so I guess that's some of the bad stuff. We've also seen some of the companies that are more poorly run going heavily into debt, which is a really serious concern for our members and their ability to get the kind of wages and benefits they want. And I guess on the surprisingly positive side, we have not given back so far in any of our contracts. We have to negotiate about 30 contracts a year. And so we've negotiated dozens of contracts since the economy went down the tubes. And we have held the line so far on maintaining all the benefits that we have improved in the last 10 years. And right now we're negotiating with a number of large employers in New York. They are asking us to give back on, health care and pension. And we're just really determined that we're going to fight and we're not going to do it. And that's our, what the membership and the leadership are committed to do. Norma Milligan, well, I wanted to turn it over to you. Norma's a shop steward and a local president in one of those shops and is really on the front lines of the fight to maintain the gains that we have gotten. Norma?
Well, over the past years, like Megan said, our union had fought to increase in our benefits, like our health benefit, dental, for our spousal, and for our dependent children. With the economy now, the way it is, it's hitting the industry real hard, because there's a lot of shops that are closing. A lot of shops are closed, gone into bankruptcy, and you know where that leaves us. Now, what happened, the bosses are trying to do, they're trying to cut back the hours. They cut back the hours a certain part of the week, and another part, they bring up the hours to avoid that overtime. So what happened now is a lot of people in my shop that they have the kids They have the brothers and sisters, like the family, they have to move back in with them in order to help them to pay their mortgage. There's a lot of foreclosure in people's home. There's a lot of garnishing of checks because of some bills that you have out there you wasn't able to pay. There's a lot of people not working for years. You can't find a job. Now, I live in housing, for example, and there's a market price that it has out there. It's not no ceiling anymore. So when you reach that point, it's a cut-off. No. Every year it goes up and up and up. And if these hours are cut back, our paycheck are cut back, what can we do? I used to see the girls on my job, like every Friday they get a paycheck, they'll go out and they'll buy Chinese food. They can't do that anymore. They'll split and buy a box of pizza and split it between each other. Now laundry work is very hard, and you can't work on a slice of pizza. But that's what we have to do, to keep it going. But it's so sad to know that you have to work so hard for nothing. It depends, a roof over your head, your medication, which is important for your health, and to keep food in your stomach. Now you have your kids. Your kids, you have to, if you have a meal for your kids, you have 3 meals, you have to make it 2 or 2.5. You can't afford to give them this is what I hear from my shops, and my sympathy goes out, because it's not easy. Right now we're in negotiation for a new contract, and it's not easy, it's hard. Because the bosses are complaining because they say the customers are asking to cut their prices because of the economy. Now, if they cut the prices for the customers, they're going to want to cut ours. They're asking back for things that we already have. And for the past couple of years, we haven't given back anything. I remember first when I started my union, there's a lot of things we didn't have. We didn't have optical, dental, or maternity, nothing at all. But for the past couple of years, we have fought and we have fought and we have fought, and we reached to this point where we can say, well, okay, my spouse is sick, he go to the hospital, he can be covered with a certain amount of percentage. My daughter, she need dentures, or she need whatever, dental care, she can go and have it. Optical, she can go and have it. My daughter was wearing glasses since she was in 2nd grade. And thank God, because of the union, that's what we do. So like he was saying, organizing. There's a lot of, shops out there need to be organized in order to be competitive, because these bosses are saying, well, there's a non-union shop. Why would I pay all this money to, and they're getting all the jobs. So it's very difficult. It's very difficult in this, with this crisis. One girl called me and she said that she heard that they said that the recession is over. Over where? Maybe over the hill. I don't know over where, because it's still here, it exists. At this very moment we are sitting here. And you leave here and you go home, you'll find a bill in your mailbox or something.
Nora, do you want to tell them what you did with the owner of the company? Distributed a letter to all the workers.
The owner in my company, I'm sorry I didn't have a copy of the letter, but I could memorize some of what he had in it. But the most, amazing thing is that he didn't put the company's address, and he didn't sign his name to the bottom of it. But what he asked him for, take back, even to the 10 minutes break. I work in a laundry, and it's a laundry when it's hot, and when it's cold. It's steady work, you have to be on your legs all day. You have to push and push. And they're looking for a certain amount of numbers, like maybe 1,200 pieces per hour. And you have to keep up with that. Now you're taking back that 10-minute break from you. So he sent us these letters. So we don't agree to the letter. So what we did, at lunchtime, we all get together, and we went in front of his office, and we had those letters. And we said, you going to accept this letter? He said, no. So we ripped the letters up, put them in a bag, and we hang them on his door. We send back that message to him. Because we work for him. We put money in his pocket, and he could disrespect us like that in the first place. That means he doesn't care. So, it's real hard. Because we can't tell our landlord, okay, because of the recession, I can't afford to pay my rent. You can end up on the street. And what's going to happen? It's so crazy, it's not funny. So.
Thank you. 338.
The current crisis, Great Recession that they're calling it, has really created alarming rates of unemployment in New York. In the industries, though, that we represent, which the sectors are food, retailing, mental health facilities, senior care facilities, and so on, the jump in unemployment has not been that great in those particular areas. The problems in these areas, though, predate the recession and will probably continue to exist after the recession is over. And among the problems, and let's take the retail industry, is just the nature of the work. People work long hours, usually 6 days a week. They have no evenings, they have no Saturdays. Young and old, they stand on their feet for long hours, whether or not they're physically capable of taking that abuse. And in the residences we have for people with mental disabilities and even some of the senior residents, it becomes very difficult work because some of the folks are unwell or unbalanced even, and are difficult to deal with, and takes a lot of energy out of people. However, there is in the unionized sector of the industry a certain contentment with things that we've been able to achieve. In the supermarket field, if you're a full-time worker, you have a solid middle-class income now, and you have full family health care paid entirely by the employer, plus dental and optical and pension and so on, and all the normal types of benefits you'd expect. But a little more remarkable is the fact that if you are a part-time worker, and we have about 7,000 of them, you still have fully paid by the employer an individual health plan. Only about 6% of the part-time workers in the nation have any health plan at all. So we're proud of those achievements. I'm not saying it's an easy job. This is not, like all work is difficult, this is particularly difficult, but there have been, of course, some achievements. The thing that attracts our attention, though, most directly, is the fact that 75 or 80% of the industries we're active in are non-union. And in those, amongst those employers, the situation is completely dire. Almost across the board, people are working at or very near the minimum wage. Now, I did a little mathematics to help folks who can't do that easily by themselves, but if you work typically 60 hours and your employer actually pays time and a half, you would get paid $507 a week before taxes as a gross. How you pay your rent is another question, but that would be what your gross is. Many, unfortunately, get less because employers in these industries routinely ignore both the minimum wage standards and the legal obligation to pay time and a half for overtime in the non-union area. Non-union employers refuse to pay for holidays, for vacations, and for sick days. And that's a particularly troublesome thing, and I say for the sick days, because in these industries, which involve both public contact and contact with people who are debiled for other reasons, or have weakened physical states for other reasons, it is routine for workers to show up while they're running fevers or exhibiting clear physical problems. I recall seeing one guy showing up to work with an impacted wisdom tooth and his face was all blown out, and he was coming to work because he had no paid sick day. If he took the day off, he would certainly not get paid. He might get fired, and he wouldn't be able to pay his bills. So he shows up to work. Of course, he has no health benefit either, and where he would go would probably be an emergency room, which will tie you up for about 8 hours before you even get treated. So that's kind of the reality of life there. you run into union workers sometimes, and they're in such desperate situations, it almost breaks your heart. Non-union workers, I mean. In one of the best known and prestigious cultural institutions in New York City, there was a very lovely woman working there, a grandmother, a woman on in age, who had arthritis and had other circulatory problems and was having difficulty standing for her shift of 8 to 10 hours. And she asked repeatedly for a stool where she might rest occasionally and so on. When we got in there, started organizing, we sent a very tough letter to the museum board of directors, and they, gave her for the first time, after she begged for 8 years, they gave her a cushioned mat to stand on and a stool to occasionally rest on. Now, what we're talking about here is just basic humanity. I mean, it's really contempt the way people are treated. Recently, we had an election at a agency that aids autistic children. We have a lot of immigrants now in both areas, the supermarkets and in the human services areas. And one man who was a doctor in his own country was commuting 4 hours a day, round trip, 2 each way, from Jersey to Brooklyn, for a job paying him less than $10 an hour. And they had the nerve to fire him because he was a supporter of the union. Now, I'll give you another sort of example of this. Many times I've seen, it's almost like it's an iconic thing. I see people running soaking wet to hit the punch clock. I bet you've seen this sometimes. And why are they soaking wet? Well, it's towards the end of the week. It's raining out, and they didn't have the money for the token. Based on the income they have, based on the wages they have, their money runs out before the end of the week. So they had a long walk to work through the pouring rain, and we're anxious to get there and punch that time clock. And these are the conditions. And you can only imagine the tension involved in living a life like this. A few years ago, I was organizing limousine drivers. And these folks have a particularly onerous thing because they have to buy their own car, pay $6,000 a year in insurance for a livery vehicle, buy licenses from the state, pay the company that dispatches them a down payment and a percentage of their income. They are so close to the wire that they cannot afford to go home after the late night shift. They serve Wall Street mainly. The big corporations send people out on vouchers. And they want to be there early in the morning for the early shift, to be dispatched. So what they do regularly is they sleep on, quiet streets in downtown Manhattan. One in particular that I could always find 50 cars at was down near the heliport, where they would sleep under the highway. The highway was running above, and they were down below. And at 4 o'clock in the morning, we organized that industry by knocking on the window, waking these guys up, and, getting them to sign union cards and following through on it. And these are almost completely immigrants, by the way. This is almost a complete, I would say it is. Mentally, it's 99% foreign-born. Okay. I can give you a lot more examples of different things, but I'm not going to do that. But what I am going to say is, what happens, the easy answer is, well, why don't these folks join a union and then move up to the union standards? And the fact of the matter is, it's by no means an easy thing for anybody to join a union today, and particularly low-income workers. And should I explain that a bit, Larry? Do we got time for this? Just give an insight into that?
Give yourself 2 or 3 minutes more.
I'll give it 2 minutes.
We're getting close on one.
Okay. So, the minute we file a petition for a company, the company brings in attorneys. We've had the last 3 campaigns, we had $500 an hour attorneys from the biggest law firms in New York, even though they were small groups of workers. We had Jackson Lewis, Proskauer Rose, and no, not that. Bink, wait a minute, I got it here somewhere. Anyway, one other big white shoe law firm, Epstein Becker.
Oh.
So, in addition, in 3 recent cases, they brought in an expert. Now, what all of these lawyers and experts do is they grab the employees along with the supervisors and one-on-one for the 42 days it takes from filing for an election and having a vote. They ride each and every employee, turning the whole situation into a hell. Now, their so-called expert, we have discovered, is a guy that was thrown out of a union because his local was accused by their international of being mobbed up and having rank corruption. And this guy tried to block the trusteeship and was later found that he was using union funds for personal reasons. This is the guy they bring in to tell these workers that all the unions are corrupt. Can you imagine that? Huh? This guy shouldn't be allowed out in the daytime. The other thing is the whole labor law regime has fallen apart. The punishment for bribing workers, the punishment for threatening workers, which is routine. I mean, a worker will be taken aside and say, look, you come in late many times, you're lucky to have a job. If I don't see you out against the union, you're out of here. Another worker, the day before the election, was offered a management position. Of course, after we won the election, that was withdrawn. That worker was identified as our observer at the union election, so they offered a management position to the woman, you know. She voted for the union anyway. But if you get caught bribing or threatening, the punishments are laughable. You post a sign saying, I won't do it again, or something like that. Huh? If you fire somebody and the board forces you to bring them back to work, they don't get their full back pay. They subtract whatever the unemployment benefits were. If they had another job, they subtract that. It's nickel and dime. So the employers know we can violate these laws and so on, and they do that. Now, particularly rough is the pressure on the immigrant worker. Recent campaign, the employer handed out documents from the Department of Justice saying they had to sign these documents after the union showed up, right? Scared the hell out of the people, right? This is an employer who pays in cash. He told them, well, now with the union, we'll give you a regular check, but we're going to take out all of the money for Social Security, disability, and so on and so forth. Not plus your union dues, you'll get about half of what you get now. Threatens them with, regularizing their pay, right? They tell them that they won't give them any more overtime, which, by the way, in the retail industry, the employer controls the overtime, which is a very big factor when you're a low-paid worker. No more overtime. All right, for all of these reasons, I'm wrapping up now. It's very, very difficult. The upbeat stuff, there's a bill in the city council right now. It's got 35 sponsors, which will mandate paid sick leave for all employers with more than 5 employees. We're hoping to see that bill come through sometime in January. We're certainly pushing very hard for it. Some workers in New York are covered by living wage legislation, so that if it's a company that does business with the city, they have to pay about $11 or $12 an hour. And finally, about half the time we run in campaigns, we win them. So there is a steady increase in the number of unionized people.
That's great. Larry, if I can just say something for 1 minute.
Just give me a second and then I'll get back to you. Okay? And then, did you want to speak also?
No,
or
it's
we do it
okay.
together? All right. Well, before we get back to the panel and then questions and comments as well, I want to do 2 things. When we talk about exploited workers, probably, unfortunately, among those on the bottom of the list are farm workers. And folks might not know this, but there's a huge farm worker industry in New York State. It's one of the biggest farm worker states in the country. And without getting into another speech, I mean, they even have sub-minimum wage for under 18-year-old workers. Let alone the whole question of breaks and many of the other things that the panelists have talked about. All that is to say is I'm going to pass these around. There's a bill in the New York State Legislature now in support of farm workers. Feel free to take one for yourself or to take a stack for your organization, school, or community. And I'll pass these both ways. The second thing I want to say is I will also pass around while we're continuing, if anyone wants to be on the email list and contact list of the Left Labor Project, I will pass around a sign-in sheet. And with that, back to Eli, and then any comments from anybody, comments or questions. Panel can ask each other as well as folks in the, we can do this informally.
So, just to add upon what Kevin was saying, so let's say you get through all those obstacles and the voters actually, the workers vote to have a union. You would think that would mean that there would be, the boss would have to sit down and negotiate a contract, but that's actually completely false. The boss doesn't have to. This is one of the major reasons why Local 78 does not do bottom-up organizing. Almost never. We do with top-down organizing, which is the contractors get hired by building owners and institutions. And we go after the institutions that hire non-union contractors. We don't generally do bottom-up from the workers. We recently actually had a campaign with the hazardous waste removal company. These guys get paid $9, $11 an hour. They're forced to work 80, 100 hours a week. They do get overtime, but time and a half. But they're basically forced to work that time. 95% of them signed cards saying they wanted a union. By the time the election came, it was a very close vote. I think it was 36 to 32, because of all the scare tactics. And the 4 union leaders were all fired by the boss. And the National Labor Relations Board found that it was legal firings. Okay, it clearly wasn't, but they were targeted for their union activity. Point is, they won the election. The boss sat down with us and refused to negotiate in good faith. I mean, he said he would give them a 15-cent an hour raise, and that was his final. Right? And it's completely bald-faced. Refused.
Average wage in the industry, 15 cents.
What in that industry?
Yeah.
That industry, the workers were making. I mean, anywhere the supervisory workers were making $18 an hour, but the bulk of the workers, the laborers, were making $9, $10, $11, $12 an hour. And he said he absolutely refused to have a closed shop, which is meaning closed shop means that all of the workers have to be union. That is the basis for organizing. I mean, you have to have a closed shop. And so he just basically met with us every once in a while until the 1 year came up, and at that point the election's null and void. And so that's really, if you get through all the obstacles of actually having the workers vote for a union, then you can face a boss who just refuses to sit down and negotiate in good faith.
So even though you get the representation of the workers, the bosses may just refuse to?
Yeah. The law says, according to the law, and Kevin probably knows this much better than I do because we don't do this very often for these very reasons. But the law says that the contractor has to bargain in good faith, right?
Right.
Yeah. And
good. What does good faith mean?
What does good faith
means you got to show up and talk to you. Now, we have a contract. We, by the way, in probably 80% of the places we organize, we have been able to get contracts. And we have a very tough bargaining situation. We fight tough too. But We are up in one place, we reached the 1 year mark. Now, of course, you still represent the workers unless they have another vote to decertify the union. We currently are still representing those workers, and we will, until hell freezes over, represent those workers and continue to pressure this employer. We will never, ever go away.
Good.
And I welcome this guy to become an example of what happens when you screw around with the union.
So comments, questions?
I'd like to ask Alex a question. You-
Eli.
Eli, I'm sorry.
No, no,
I don't know
it's
why
okay.
I heard Alex.
Yeah, he's Alex.
You're Alex, I don't know.
He's much more handsome than I am, though.
Your union is strictly asbestos abatement.
That's principally what we do. I mean, we also led a
So
hazardous
you're not
waste.
affected really by the new construction.
Right.
So you work just in old buildings or demolition work.
Exactly. You know, and in New York City, usually when they build a new building, they have to tear one down because. So.
Yeah, that's true. But
Yeah.
I was just trying to get my head around all of this construction that's going on in my neighborhood, and that's not your stuff because it's new and it's was on vacant land.
Okay. Yeah. If it's on vacant land, then we don't do it.
Yeah, they stole it from the Park West Village.
Okay.
Have you ever heard of a case where an employer went to jail for breaking a labor law?
Never.
Yeah. I have.
Really?
Yeah.
Organizing or gangsters? No, I mean,
Um,
seriously, I mean, for gang-related RICO stuff? Or for
No,
organizing?
no. Well, I mean, asbestos, asbestos removal, those are labor laws. Those are within the Department of Labor. So they do go to jail for breaking, for doing dry removal and doing unsafe or illegal asbestos removal. Currently, there actually is a public construction work, any construction work that goes on with public money, and just bringing it back to the theme of this panel. Right now the private work is dried up. Almost all of the work out there now is public, and that's really what we're living off of at this point. Public, and then the UN is UN's. They're doing a lot of abatement over there right now. So yeah,
That's a job. Good job.
yeah, we just got done with the Deutsche Bank building, which was great for us. I mean, truthfully.
But to answer your question, for a standard unfair labor practice thing in a union election, no employer has ever gone to jail, and it is not considered a criminal act. It's considered a civil violation. There's no jail time to it.
Are there fines?
Huh?
Are there fines?
No.
There are fines, but they're ridiculous. I mean, it pays to cheat.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely. And for as far as the public any construction project with public money, they've got to pay what's called the prevailing wage, which is usually the union rate. And it's actually now a felony. They also have to submit certified payrolls, which the owner signs, the company signs, saying, yes, I paid this rate. It's now a felony to submit fraudulent certified payrolls. So actually we've got a few DAs that are pursuing criminal charges against contractors that have submitted fraudulent payrolls. So
it would be fair to say that when there is a labor law that affects workers and only workers, it's very unlikely that the process will be penalized. But if there is a labor law, like an environmental labor law, that may affect other people than workers, then the law may be enforced more heavily. And,
That's great. One more shocking thing, though, that you should know is there was a court decision a couple of years ago regarding immigrant workers, undocumented workers. And the decision was that even if we win their case in the civil court arena, they're not entitled to back wages, they're not entitled to compensation,
Or
they're
reinstatement.
not entitled to unemployment insurance.
If they're undocumented, right?
If
Or
they're
reinstatement.
undocumented.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
really outrageous.
Or reinstatement, I know.
So, they are completely defenseless right now, except for the defense the
To
union
the
can
extent that
mount.
we kick the crap out of
That's what I'm saying, except for the defense the union can mount for them.
Which is more incentive for employers to hire undocumented workers, right?
Certainly is. But it also is a testimony to the courage of the ones that are screaming into the unions right now, that they have the courage to do it under those circumstances.
Absolutely.
I have a last question, but I'll try to so that I can figure out the right one. Maybe one for Eli. I'm really curious about this sort of top-down versus bottom-up strategy. I'm curious if you could talk just a little bit more about sort of how you go about. It sounds like pressuring the institutions, which seems related to some of the sort of living wage laws, right, which use the city's power as an entity that hires, provides contracts to enforce certain labor standards. So I'm kind of curious as to how you guys go about doing it.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much. I don't know if you've seen The Rat.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
That's basically. I know it's really just tremendously anticlimactic. I wish I could tell you we, do huge rallies and we, big signs, saying the contractors and bad things about the contractor's mother or something. But no, it's just we set up The Rat, and that's in front of a spot that is in front of a sensitive spot, and basically a large part of it is just finding the sensitive spots. Finding out. For example, a developer by the name of Meringoff recently hired a substandard contractor, which is the term that we have to use as per the NLR, National Labor Relations Board, substandard contractor. And at a building that was way out in the middle of nowhere. So we find out that they have, through their website, that they own some nice buildings in Midtown Manhattan, and we take the big inflatable rat and two very ugly, smelly organizers and give them flyers.
If you know they're local, they have a lot of those, so it's not a problem finding them.
They're very lovely, Joe.
Oh, they're great, but no. They're yeah, and they distribute leaflets. Yeah, we've got a coffin now that we use too, and we bring that out. And
Is the rat effective?
yes, we find that. I mean, we have like 90% of the market share.
I talk to the rat minders, but I just want to know how effective it is in influencing the bosses.
We have, like I said, we have about 90% market share. I mean, we have more. I think that the asbestos industry. No, I'm sure that the asbestos industry is more unionized than any other construction industry in New York City, Long Island, probably any other construction industry throughout the U.S.
That's labor.
Yeah, exactly. But we're very aggressive about it. We are.
I mean, in terms of the organizing strategy question, I mean, we certainly do both at the same time, and I think, for all the reasons outlined. I mean, we organize workers, we sign people on union cards, and we get people to stand up, to their employers publicly when possible to fight. But fundamentally, to get a contract at the end of the day, you have to bring leverage to bear. I mean, you have to back people up with something. Either they have to have a really strong, even if they strike, which is ultimately what leverage they have, but otherwise, the strike has to be backed up in the same way, right? I mean, I know that Norma and I worked together on an interesting campaign where we were organizing this little sweatshop laundry in the Bronx. It had very high-profile restaurants as their customers, which is sort of this kind of piece of it. And, we signed the workers up. The company fired them. They were being paid like $4 an hour. And we just, we did a lot of public demonstrations in front of those restaurants, many, and ultimately got actually some genuine support, not just fear, but some genuine support from the manager of several of them that ultimately helped the workers, get their jobs back and get a contract where, that like doubled or tripled their wages and things like that. But you can't. I mean, the laws are so inadequate that you just can't let it rest on that alone.
you have another one?
Yeah, I was
And then
going to ask a slightly broader follow-up question. You guys touched on, I think almost all of you touched on sort of three things I think sound really important and interesting. One is I'm sure we would all agree on sort of labor legislation. So I'm kind of curious. It seems to me as somebody who follows it very peripherally that you know that the Employee Free Choice Act is not certainly doesn't have the head of steam that it did, let's say, a year ago. So I would welcome any comments on that. But there's two things that also came up that seem really interesting, and I'd love more comments on it, however you see it. One is that almost all of you mentioned housing. The fact is that the crisis has hit so many of your members in terms of either their mortgages or the value of their house or some sort of aspect of the foreclosure crisis or the housing crisis. And I'm just wondering if you wouldn't comment on, if you feel like commenting on that. Or that you all mentioned health. The fact that you've had so much of the fight has been over basic health benefits, which would be totally unnecessary if we had some sort of national health care, which is again currently some sort of program that's currently on the table. So if you thought about labor's role in that, I'm just kind of opening this up for you all to speak as broadly as possible.
Esteban, you want to take your first crack at it?
I don't know what's the process with EFCA right now, but you're right. It lost its muster from a year ago, from when the election time up to now. I think what they agreed to was that there was not going to be any card check. You guys have to correct me if I'm wrong. There's not going to be any card check, but there's going to be a shorter period of time before the election process. I don't know whether that helps or not, because even though between that period, we still got the most anti-union tactics, illegal tactics that go on in the workshop. We have no way of contacting getting to the worker in the workshop, and that's my opinion on it. It's just I don't see EFCA going to be any fruition in EFCA anytime soon. Do you have anything?
And the other strong provision of the EFCA, the Employee Free Choice Act, was mandatory arbitration of first contracts, which dealt with what Eli was bringing up before, and I think that's in trouble also. I think it's pretty clear that they will stiffen some of the penalties on the employer, but the net effect is going to be very little, and I see it as a great defeat. It's unbelievable, really. On the this paid sick thing, I should tell you that the mayor, when asked his position on this, said, well, he said, he's not for putting burdens on small businesses. He said he would accept it for companies with 50 employees or more. Well, that's not where the problem is in New York. It's the less than 50 employees, the common employment place. And, this mayor who cries crocodile tears every time you talk about taxing the rich or putting some tax on business, this guy has no sympathy for the poor mother who's trying to figure out what to do with the fevered kid in a place where she has no sick leave and she's got no daycare and no relatives around her. And, it is like that human being does not exist in this mayor's universe. All he cares about is billionaires and their taxes and businessmen and their taxes. It's a disgrace.
I would be interested in hearing from you who are directly in touch with the rank and file of working people. What is your perception about their mental state, their mood, how interested people who have those tremendous pressures, on their livelihood, employment, making ends meet, how big in their lives the concerns of, the political life of the country weigh, like political activity, intellectual engagement among those people, about working people, because it seems to me that that the people are so pressed, right, just to survive, right, and it seems to be like a battle for survival, and the union organization seems to be hinged around just protecting the most basic, needs of workers at a very elementary level. Like, it seems that without that, bigger space for people to breathe and to think broadly and to think about, unity and that I wonder about that. What is your impression? Are people fragmented, desperate, or is there a basis for hope, or that people? That would be very interesting.
Okay, I don't know if this would answer part of your question, but my experience that I have a young lady in my shop, and she had cancer. She went and she was off for a period of time, and she had treatment. Now she returned to work, and just after she returned to work, well, she have to keep up with her appointments. She said one morning she got up and she felt dizzy. She called the boss and she told him she felt dizzy, the way she felt, and she couldn't come to work. But still, he took it upon himself. When she came to work the next day, he gave her a written warning. I said that was her final warning. If she stay out anymore, she's going to be fired. Now she's saying her daughter is now working, her son came back home, and somebody has to, put the food on the table, right? And after she been out for so long, and she come back, that's pressure. And she said, Norma, you know what? My head hurt. When she saw that letter, she started crying. She could have a breakdown right there. I mean, I don't think that's fair. Because even though you're sick, and with the economy you're struggling, because she can't go on welfare, because they cut welfare. She can't do that, but she's trying. So I don't know if this will give you an idea of what's really going on. This lady, she's depressed. That might lead her further into depression. Who knows what might happen, because thinking about her illness and the way she's being treated because of her illness. Like I told them, you didn't ask to be sick. When you go shopping, it does not drop in your shopping cart, right? It's just there. And we have to learn to deal with it. And she's trying to deal with it, and with the pressure from them, it's just like crazy, because all it is greed. Is like, and then she has to produce these numbers. It's just pushing. You forget all those years. So I don't know if that would help some of your,
Well, this is making
your thinking.
I'm amazed that these people can fight, and tell you the truth. You work 60 hours a week, going home to a crowded living situation. I think a lot depends on background, family background. Seems some families are able to pass along a more militant tradition to the younger people. Immigrants from some countries come here with a more militant tradition than others. In general, though, most of these folks would just really like to integrate into the work scene and earn a decent living and have a peaceful life. They come to the fight only when there's no other choice. I have great admiration for people who fight under those conditions. I really do.
Anyone have anything to add?
I think that...
Oh, there's some questions.
Was the workers aware of the windows and doors people that were sitting in when their factory tried to move? Were people talking about that? I know a lot of people where I work were talking about that, because it was, here are these people really fighting back to keep their company, and they won.
Well, they got paid.
Well, they got their pay and, stuff like
Partially,
that.
the factory closed down.
Yeah.
The factory did end up closing down, but they did. Were people thinking about, because I know it was on the news somewhat.
Like this sit down like in Chicago a few months back. No.
You actually bring up a point that I want to make, because I think it's a point of thanks, I think, to the panel, which is that is a classic case of sort of the old economy leaving, right? The manufacturing economy leaving, but all of you guys fight for the jobs that aren't going anywhere, but are terribly low-wage jobs, with terrible conditions, that we can outsource, and that is creating sort of this divide. They've gutted that in-between space where you get a manufacturing job making $5 an hour and raise your family. And now what's left is essentially the spaces that you guys are organizing, and the spaces you're fighting with, workers speaking tons of different languages from unleashing backgrounds, impacted by no urban policy whatsoever, providing housing or healthcare or any other thing. So the labor movement is left to fight for absolutely everything to survive. So that's the thing that impressed me by the work you're doing.
I would like to comment on that. When the labor movement started in this country in the early days, there were a hell of a lot of foreign languages being spoken in the shops and in the mills and the farms, and it's not a new phenomenon, and they did it. My mother was an organizer. She did it with Italians and Jews and Spaniards and
For which
all
union?
that. ILGWU.
Yeah. Here in New York City?
No, it was in Newark.
Okay.
And it was in the 1930s, in
Wow.
the Depression. But there was a tremendous amount of language barriers then, as there is today, and we can't blame the lack of progress today on the language law.
In fact, I would say, just to close, other than thanking the panel, folks, we really pulled this together in a matter of days, and people really went out of their way to make the time to
And very
participate.
successfully.
And I just want to close, the parallels between, as others have said, between the 30s and now are incredible. And they exist not just in terms of the economy and unemployment and kind of like the bad news, but they also exist in, not completely yet, which is why we need a resurgent left, but they also exist in terms of the nature of the working class, the similarities, the influence of immigrant workers with the positive traditions from their home countries that they bring here, where, and many, many others. And so, there are, ultimately the 30s was a good period, ultimately, in terms of the surge, the resurgence, the building of the labor, all those things. And hopefully we can take what we have now and duplicate that, obviously with the specifics for this period. Thank you everyone for coming. Thank you.